Welcome to Action Talks. Brilliant. I'm trying to establish or to get to concrete examples of where the right to know is important for Namibians. Can you give us some examples of that have happened where it was essential they know something in order to make decisions, or future cases of this happening?
Okay, one example that I can talk about on this is the land conference that Namibia is going to have. It is very critical for one to know who owns the land, how many pieces of land they own, and where exactly they own that land. We need to have a registry that actually details all these things in place. But then at the moment, we find that no one has got access to that particular information. So no one can foresee what's going to be actually talked about at that particular conference. And people don't really know how they are also going to be able to give their input at that conference, because they need to have this information beforehand so that they may know the future steps to take on.
Absolutely, that's a good example. So in other words, if we don't know who owns the land, how can we make decisions about the future on this very burning and important and controversial topic in Namibia? Frederico, do you have some other, as I say, because I think it's very important that people realize that this actually impacts them directly, and it's not some sort of pie in the sky academic campaign on this elusive right to information, but it really impacts people at all levels of society.
Well, we're just in now November 2017, we've had the Ombudsman release a report on racism, tribalism, and other forms of discrimination. And a lot of the submissions dealt with difficulties youth in rural areas and people with disabilities face in accessing services and accessing information in general. And one of the striking submissions in that was actually a whole section in the report deals with how difficult it is for rural youth and young people, both boys and girls, to access contraceptive information and contraceptives, and how unforthcoming health workers are in terms of information and the actual contraceptives themselves. So you have these really real world instances where access is frustrated. And the Ombudsman in his report actually mentions very specifically that people need access to information in rural areas. So we can make these evidence-based sort of judgments on what's happening out there in the country.
Perhaps a last question to both of you, or comments really. It seems to me that the freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, access to information, are all inextricably linked. And I think it's important that people realize that that is important, because I think there's a perception that access to information is about the media. It's not only about the media, as your examples have shown us. And yet, how do we convince people that it's not only about media in the first place, but also the fact that media plays an absolutely critical role in access to information? Would you like to just speak very briefly to the importance of media?
Yes, I think that's where we come back to the issue of media literacy. And then just generally rights literacy. How do people know their rights? Do people know what the rights of others are? Are people exercising their rights? Are people aware of what's in the Namibian Constitution and how that is impacted by things like Article 19 of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights? So the question becomes, how do we create this rights awareness? How do we get people to take seriously what is in their best interest? What sort of outreach initiatives and interventions do we need to be engaged in order to achieve this? How long would this take? Because these things, I mean, activism is not, you can't break it down into a few months, a few years. Change is generational. So you need to be speaking over a long period of time to people. You need to be engaging with them over quite an extensive period. So that is what action ultimately envisions for the long term. You know, having this long-term engagement with society and growing all the time and growing its own profile, so that people realize that Action is a credible civil society grouping that speaks and is invested in the what's best for Namibian society.
Excellent. And brilliant, do you think, on that note, that action is taken seriously by the different sectors and players in Namibian society? Is government aware of the work of action? Do they listen to the voice of action?
Yes, I do think that action is being taken seriously, and yes, government also takes it seriously, and they do listen to our voice. They also do ask us for help in any field that they're involved in. But all I want to say is that the moment that people get to understand and realize that this is a fundamental human right that people should actually exercise, the more action that we're going to see coming out of this.
Excellent. Thank you.